didn't have a leadership meeting this month, and previous months we actually didn't have them, everyone being remote. We did a couple of months ago. But it does seem like we do need not necessarily a leadership meeting, but we do need a back-to-school time of prayer. And we can just make that decision. Since we have something going on today and next Sunday, the last Sunday, let's just plan on having a back-to-school prayer for parents, students, teachers, everyone associated, bus drivers and cafeteria workers, because we definitely need it. Which brings up and really every time I think about it, just become emotional. It's been a long, and at this point, 19 months. It's been a long 19 months, and we've seen so much take place. Pardon me a second. And some of us have gone through so much. We've all been blessed to still be here. Amen. But it's been a long road. We cannot underestimate the power of prayer. Underestimate the power of just Christian fellowship, being able to come together. Amen. This is a real blessing, being able to come together. We can't underestimate what God is doing, has been done. But the thought came to mind, we could try to add more tools to our toolkit in fighting anxieties and things that we might go through during the past months, and still more to come. And so we're reaching out, really wanted to reach out to professionals who could arm us with more tools. Yes, we do have prayer. We can, and we should go to God in prayer on a day-to-day and practical basis. There may be some additional things that we can do, and so we're reaching out to professionals who can come by and give us some tips. And so we are thankful. We do have in our midst our own Dr. D now, amen, who's been able to reach out and engage a couple of professionals to come by. And I see that Charisse is on. Thanks, Charisse, for being able to join. As you can tell, just listening to the testimonies, you have a following here already. And so thank you for being here. We're going to sing this chorus, Open Our Eyes, Lord. I'm going to turn it over to Dee to introduce our speaker, and then she'll come via Skype. I think we have everything set up, and so we'll just turn it over. So let's just sing this to the Lord. Open our eyes, Lord. We want to see Jesus, to reach out and touch Him and say that we love Him. Open our ears, Lord.
morning. Today our guest speaker is Mrs. Charisse Johnson. Charisse is a licensed social worker and a motivational speaker. She has over 20 years of experience working with children and families involved in adverse childhood situations and trauma. Mrs. Johnson is a first aid mental health youth and adult instructor, a master's addictions counselor, a child and adolescent trauma specialist, response ability pathway trainer, and darkness to light sexual abuse trainer. She currently works as a therapist with Regenerations Counseling Agency, pupil personnel worker with Prince George's County Public Schools, and health coach with Herbalife Nutrition Company. As a health coach, Mrs. Johnson is bringing financial empowerment and a healthy lifestyle to the community. She has made a commitment to strengthen communities and build families. She is a member of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated and supports service, scholarship, sisterhood, and finer womanhood. Mrs. Johnson is married with 2 children, lives in Maryland, and is expanding her outreach to the community by opening up a healthy cafe to support physical and emotional health. Elevation Nutrition, LLC. Charisse.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Hi.
So different being in Skype as opposed to reaching out and touching with you all. So we're going to make this as interactive. I'm just going to ask that if I actually see the point that I can share the screen. So if you want, I can try to share my screen and I can bring up the PowerPoint. Would that be okay? Or you want to go ahead and do it on your end?
Yeah, that's a good point. If you could try, I know some devices might have a problem, but go ahead. That'll be the first choice. If you can go ahead and share your screen. And the backup is, yeah,
Okay.
Looks like it's working. So.
All right, let's see. Yay, it worked.
Yes, we're in good shape.
Okay. All right, so I can't see you all, but by all means, if you have any questions, please just stop me because I do love to talk, okay? So you don't have to wait until the very end of the presentation to have a discussion because any question or any thought that you might have is very important and I want to make sure that we're validating it and that we're actually here to address it, okay? Okay, can you all hear me? We're good?
Yes, we're good.
Oh, all right, so I'm going to begin. Today's topic is very important, not just to the community at large, but the community within your household. So whether it is a family unit of having a mother and a father, if it is having a mom and children, or a dad and children, or aunties or grandparents, or any kinship care raising children, today's daily task of getting up can actually be one of the hardest chores that some people are experiencing. And so when we talk about becoming mentally well, this is something that needs to not have a taboo effect to it. It really needs to be an open, candid conversation that you should be able to have with anyone, including children at the age of 3, when you ask them how they're doing, as opposed to someone who may be 99 and you're asking them how they're doing. And so what is mental health? And really, in a nutshell, mental health is a level of psychological, behavioral, and cognitive and emotional well-being. It is the state where you actually feel that you are stable. You have some sort of satisfactory enjoyment, whether it is going to work or whether it is you're being at home or whether it is for children when they go to school. And as we know with COVID, there are a lot of things that are happening with mental health. Everyone says, oh, it doesn't affect me. I don't have mental health. In actuality, everyone does have mental health. The difference is, do you have mental health or do you have a mental illness? So keep in mind that everyone has, whether it's a good state, a middle ground, or a lower state of mental health. Everyone in its entirety has mental health. What does mental health affect? Mental health really affects how we think, we feel, and we act. You know, one of the things that I tell people is that whatever you're thinking, that becomes your action. Whatever you're feeling, that becomes your action. So when you look at the stress levels and how you relate to people and how sometimes we're unable to make those really good, healthy choices, All of those things impact how we think and how we act. When you think about, oh, I'm going to have a really positive day, then typically those positive things kind of come to you. When you wake up and your bones are kind of cracked and you're getting out of the bed, you're like, I just don't really feel like going to work. I just don't have it in me. And you say, well, I'm just going to lay here. Then you typically lay there, and things that happen that come along with it, you begin to lay there as well. So if you change your mindset and changing it into healthy positive, then healthy positive things will come. And even when adverse conditions come, because you've already altered your state of mind to thinking, this is going to be a very healthy, practical way of me doing things, then you begin to do those actions. When you relate your actions to, I just don't really know if I can do this, things are really haunting and they're daunting on me, and then the negativity sets in, then typically things that line up will begin to be negative as well. So mental health really affects how we handle stress, how we relate to others. Working in the school system, I noticed that there are a lot of times that things will have happened at home, and those things will be brought over into the schoolhouse. So whether it is children who argue with parents, or whether or not it's spouses, or even parent-child relationship, when we are unable to handle that stress, we do carry it with us like baggage. When we are mentally unwell, we really do risk not just having mental health, like poor mental health, but we really do affect our body shutting down. I was listening to the young lady who said that she was now having some dental issues because of stress. It will increase your heart disease. It will increase your ability to metabolize your sugar, which causes us to have diabetes. It can increase stroking. It can also increase other health diseases. There are a lot of things that happen with stress, and you're like, my stomach is really upset, I don't know what's going on. My feet hurt, I have a continuous headache. I'm craving sugar, I really just need to eat cheeseburgers. All of those things really do affect your mental health, because when you're not at a stage of equilibrium, which means a state of balance, then all of your balance for your levels will go off. And so your thoughts become your actions. Laying in the bed, not wanting to get up, not wanting to go walk, not wanting to cook a healthy meal, not even wanting to answer the phone when people call. There are often times where you're going through a lot of stress and you say, I just want to be left alone. And so you begin to isolate yourself. But when you isolate yourself, you also are putting yourself at higher risk of developing other adverse conditions, including health conditions. So mental health versus mental illness. Mental health, like I said, is the general state of just being well. It's having a good mind, it's having a good body, it's having a good soul. Not saying you have to be thin, it means having those things that are really working on your mind. So whether or not it is you're waking up and you're definitely praying, and then once you pray, you say, okay, I'm going to read something that really ministers to my spirit. So if you're reading books that do a lot of personal development, if you're on YouTube, because I don't know who's in the congregation, so for those people who aren't reading books, if those people are listening to books, or those people who are on YouTube, just kind of building your mental health into a really good state of having balance. Versus mental illness. When you have mental illness, those are those things that disrupt your mental state. They interrupt how you feel, how you think, how you communicate. And you may be asking yourself, well, what's the difference? Because stress kind of looks like mental illness. Stress can look like mental illness, but we're going to actually pinpoint what the difference is later on in this. So what causes mental illness? There really is no one single cause that causes mental illness. There are various factors that contribute to having a higher risk for mental illness, which includes ACEs. And I don't know if you all have heard of ACEs, but they're early adverse life experiences. So 1 in 6 adults, so if you're counting off in church or you're counting off on the screen, 1 in 6 persons have had an adverse life experience, which means that they may have been exposed to some form of trauma, whether or not it was a divorce, if they saw a bank robbery, if they were involved in a horrific car accident, whether or not it was some sexual trauma or child abuse and neglect, whether or not they witnessed a lot of arguing in the house. Those things at a very early age impact how you respond to different things in life. They make you either overly cautious, or sometimes they put barriers up so then that way you can kind of block out those things that have happened. But when you're blocking it out, those are the things that can contribute to you actually developing a mental illness. ongoing medical conditions. We have a lot of students who come to school and they say, I have social anxiety, I'm unable to get out the car. And so literally they're sitting in the parent's car and they're unable to get out of that car and walk into the school building. We have students who have diabetes. You know, just think about that child that may have a disability from the time they were born or even at a very early age, and now they're 15 and they're in high school. Imagine the mental stress that goes along with having it. Although we do increase and say we're going to have positive thoughts, we're going to have positive actions, we're going to have positive feelings, those things really do impact your mental illness. You may have biological factors, chemical imbalances. You know, there's a lot of mental health issues that come from hereditary issues. And so when you impact that along with drugs and alcohol because you're trying to cope with different voices that are in your head or different negative thoughts, or one way you're great and life is good and you're smiling and then the next moment is you've really hit a downward spiral, those things really do impact your mental illness, as well as having limited social interactions or friends. I think a lot of the community has somewhat turned an ear on we need a whole community to be healthy. And so when we do that, we begin to push people away and we don't allow people to come into our world. And so when we do go to different things and when we're faced with those different things that may impact us, we really don't have that support that we can reach out and touch to. And what's ironic is that a lot of people say, well, kids go to school and they're okay. People go to church and they're okay. People go to work and they're okay. But those are just actions getting you to where you need to be. But when you're lacking that piece of someone asking you how you're doing, or you're lacking that piece where somebody kind of gives you a hug, and especially because in COVID, you can't reach out and touch people. You can't enter into people's circle because of fear of germs and everything else that goes on. People are beginning to have limited interactions. Those sporting activities, such as football games and soccer games, basketball games, you know, you've had to do social distance. And for 18 months, we haven't even been allowed to engage in those things in the community. When you go in the grocery store, you often find now that you don't even want to make eye contact with people because you're like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen. They might want to come over and talk to me. Or when you're even outside just taking a brisk walk in the neighborhood, you avoid making eye contact or saying hi because we're limiting those social interactions that we have. But the more that we limit those social interactions, the more we do feel isolated and feel alone. And believe it or not, there are a lot more people who are like us as opposed to unlike us. So at some point during these 18 months, people have very much felt alone. They've readjusted their life, which may have caused some mental illness, as well as feelings of isolation and loneliness. So who does this affect? You know, you can look in the mirror and you can say, it doesn't affect me, I'm really doing well. But if you have that serious, candid conversation with yourself, you'll understand and look in your world that you're not alone. That it's not just you who have experienced this, but it may have been your mom and your dad or your auntie. It may have been the next door neighbor who you haven't come see out the house in a while. It may be the postman. It may be the firefighter or the police officer. But 1 in 5 U.S. adults experience mental illness each year. 1 in 25 of those U.S. adults experience serious mental illness each year. And then 1 in 6, get this, between the age of 6. So think about what a child is doing at 6. They're playing, you know, with toys. They're learning who they are. They're about to enter first grade, up until the age of 17. So you've got your primary school age all the way up until high school, where they actually experience a mental health disorder each year. And then 50% of all lifetime, which means that those mental illnesses that just aren't here for a short period of time, but those lifelong mental illnesses begin at the age of 14. So if you close your eyes and you really center yourself into what it felt like to be 14, and if you can't remember what it feels like to be 14, then who do you know that may have a 14-year-old? And imagine some of the conversations that they've had with you about being 14 and what that looks like and what that feels like, what that smells like. When you use your senses and you are able to put yourself into somebody else's situation, then you're able to better understand some of the things that they're going through. And then 75% of those people that we're talking about by the age of 24, they will have a lifetime mental illness. One of the things that we really don't talk about, I'm hoping my PowerPoint is going to play for you, is Black male mental health. There's always been a stigma attached that, one, Black people don't go get services. If something happens within your family, you keep it in your family. Don't tell the neighbor. Don't tell your auntie. It's a hush-hush thing. When Uncle Billy comes over and Uncle Billy has schizophrenia, we just leave Uncle Billy in a corner. Or we know that Aunt Sarah has drug addiction and we see her walking on the street, we're not going to really address that because those things don't happen in our family. When things happen as Black people, we stand strong and we're able to combat it by using family. Well, the truth is, there's a lot of things that, yes, we do need family for, but then we also need professionals to help walk us through what we're going through. And one of the untouched topics are Black male mental health, especially when you look at how the male is supposed to be portrayed in the family and in the work environment and the community. And so when men cry, or when men are having a rough day, or when men are unable to get in touch with their feelings, then we shun them as opposed to embracing them and loving them. So I'm hoping this plays for you so you can see what can happen.
Going out to nature shouldn't be that difficult for any family.
An RV share makes it really.
When you look at me, what do you see? Now I'm going to go through some of the things that I typically hear. To the very astute, I usually get I'm Black, I'm bearded, and I'm strong. I also get I look like NBA superstar James Harden. I'm most definitely the poor version. I get hip-hop superstar, Emmy Award winner, Donald Glover, a.k.a. Childish Gambino. Yeah, that too, right? And last but not least, I get Curtis Jackson, a.k.a. 50 Cent. Now, one of my goals is definitely to get rich or die trying. I think Sally Mae is putting the emphasis on or die trying, right? But see, what I don't hear is, Phil, you look like somebody that lives with depression and anxiety. Phil, you look like somebody that was suicidal for 15 years, every day, 5 to 6 times a day. They don't say, Phil, you look like somebody that was driving on Interstate 95, wanting to crash your car to end your life. No. Here in America, when we think about mental health, we think about the homeless man who's walking the streets, talking nonsensically to themselves. We think about the white celebrity who takes their life via suicide. We think about the white mass murderer who goes into a high school and takes the lives of innocent children. Or it's usually your president who loves to tweet venom from the hip. But see, rarely does the conversation speak of a father of 2 kids, someone who possesses a master's in exercise science, a master's in social work, somebody pursuing a doctorate. Rarely is it a person of color. Rarely is it a Black man like myself, until now, because Black mental health matters. Now you may be asking yourself, what is Black mental health and why is it differentiated amongst racial and ethnic lines? Black mental health are the individual and collective experiences that influence the wellness of a community. Trauma is the biggest influencer of Black mental health. We're talking about historical trauma, slavery, Jim Crow, the Civil Rights Movement, the Tuskegee Experiment, up until present-day trauma. When you see somebody that looks like you get killed in their home, rest in peace, Wilton Jean. When you see somebody who's living with mental wellness issues get killed by the police. Rest in peace, Laquan McDonald of Chicago, Illinois. Or when you see somebody that looks like you get killed by somebody that looks like you. Rest in peace, Triple X Tentacion. See, when we talk about trauma, trauma is unique to the individual, and I'm no different. There were 3 impactful traumatic situations that I've experienced in my life outside of the genetic predisposition because my grandmother lived with schizophrenia. I harken back to being in 8th grade, 13 years of age, on the way to school. My mother has a nervous breakdown. She's crying. She's pulling at her clothes and her hair. She's cursing. I felt helpless because I couldn't help her or I couldn't help myself. And see, I was expected to continue to go into school that day and achieve. It's funny, when I first started telling this story, I told my mother, listen, I'm telling the story of when you had a nervous breakdown. And she said, Phil, that didn't happen. I know I'm getting older. I have a few grays, right? But I swear I remember that. And then she called me a week later and she said, Phil, I didn't know you remembered that. As if I wouldn't remember the most traumatic situation that I've experienced in my life. And that typically happens. We're often expected to just continue on because we are so resilient as a people. Because we do survive, and we survived for hundreds of years. And I was expected to survive and go into school that day and perform. And I did. Because like many of us, I learned how to suppress my emotions and my feelings. But what if I didn't? What if I went into school and I started arguing with peers and fighting? What if I started arguing with the teachers? What if I did criminalistic behaviors within the community? Would I be deemed incorrigible and then unable to be in the school setting, in a community setting? Or would anybody care that I just experienced this traumatic situation that has impacted me? Fast forward to my 12th grade year, 17 years of age, January 2001. My mother said, Phil, come downstairs. She said, Phil, your brother Bobby died. And I started crying. That was probably the only healthy coping skill that I had at the time, right? Because being a product of the hip-hop culture, hip-hop tells me when somebody dies, you either go out and get some liquor or you go get a rest in peace tattoo. Well, I wasn't old enough to drink. That would happen once I got to college, right? But I went out and I got this rest in peace tattoo. As if that was going to do something, if that was going to take away the pain of losing a primary relationship. It didn't. And people ask me, Phil, well, how did your brother die? Say, the opioid epidemic is popular now. But in the black community, in the hip-hop community, especially amongst black male, it's always existed. He was one who liked to use codeine and Xanax. I don't know what he was trying to cope with. I will never know. I went to school that Monday because I didn't have anybody to say, Phil, stay home. Because my mother was going through it because she just lost her only child. And I went to school feeling all of this emotion. And I remember it like yesterday. I was sitting in computer class. Miss Williams, my computer teacher, came up to me. And I don't know what she said. She said, Phil. She could have said, Phil, what was the score of the Eagles game last night? I let her have it. I blacked on her. I cursed her out. Why? Because I had all this built up anger, all this built up rage. Because see, when we're talking about depression and anxiety for black men especially, it doesn't look like somebody laying in bed for 6 and 7 days on end. No, it manifests itself through anger and rage. I ended up getting suspended that day. And Ms. Williams and I were able to laugh at the situation years later because I was able to cope with it and understand what I was feeling. But again, it was a moment in time that impacted my life. My third and final story happened at Bloomsburg University in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. Again, we remember traumatic situations, and I remember it like it was yesterday. I call it the Jew story, right? Because when I go fill out job applications, and it says, have you ever been convicted of a crime? As long as it doesn't say misdemeanor or felony, I can ignore it if it says that. But if it says, have you ever been convicted of a crime, I have to check it all. And then I put, well, it all started with the cup of juice. And then the employers, they laugh, like, oh, man. And I laugh like, that's my life. So the juice story is, I was coming from the gym to go get me something to eat. I got my food. I paid for it. Emphasis on pay. And you know how you go to McDonald's, they give you a cup, and you can go to the fountain and get whatever drink you want. And I did that, and I tasted it to see water, to see if it's water. But see, when you go to a predominantly white institution like Bloomsburg University, it seems like they have all the minorities' names on a list. And the school police officer said, Phil, that's stealing. Mind blown. And me having this anger, this frustration that's built up over years of trauma, and me not being able to express myself in a healthy way, I blacked on her just like I did Miss Williams. Unbeknownst to me, that would lead to 20-plus charges. I ended up going to jail that night. I ended up getting expelled from school. I ended up doing a weekend in jail because, listen, they say you'll get judged by a jury of your peers. With the average age in that community being 60 and over, it wasn't going to be a jury of my peers. But I needed that experience. I needed it. And I needed it because it told me that, Phil, I have to do something different. I ended up appealing to get back into Bloomsburg University, and people knew me, so people wanted me back. And so I got back, and I was focused. One day, my psychology professor, Dr. Cambone Camara, God bless the dead, he said, Phil, come talk to me about anything, anytime. And I took him up on that. I went and talked to him, not to talk about school. I went to talk to him about a young lady I had been courting, right? And I wanted to understand, why did she want me? So I went to his office. I'm like, listen, I bought her sneakers. I took her to the movies. I took her to dinner. Well, my mom took her to dinner and all those things because I didn't have a job. Thanks, Mom. But he said to me, Phil, in life, you change to get something or to keep something. I'm like, man, what are you talking about? Little did I know that that would become my mantra. That I realized it had to change. I had to work on my wellness so I can be whole. It took approximately 10 years, because that's the average length of time that they say somebody who lives with mental wellness issues, that's the time that it takes for them to come to grips with it and to seek treatment. For Black people, I think it's much longer. And so within those 10 years, I've been on medication, which quelled the suicidal ideations. They're no more. I go to therapy every week. Hi, Dr. Val. It's been so critical for me in my wellness because I decided to go from living to thriving. To my Black brothers and sisters, you too deserve to go from living to thriving. We no longer have to wear the mask. We're survivors. There's help now. We can get help and walk out there with our heads held high and get the treatment that we need so we can go from living to thriving. To my non-Black brothers and sisters, will you now view the Black person that you come in contact with and might be in a negative way? And recognize that, you know what, they might have gone through something. Or to see them when they excel, what they had to go through to get to that point. Or will mental health continue to be viewed in America as Kate Spade, as Anthony Bourdain, as Chester Bennington, as Robin Williams? Would it now include actor Sam Sarpong, Lee Thompson Young? Will it now include 10-year-old Ashanti Davis, who took her life because of bullying, would now represent Emmanuel Sloan, who's the reason why I'm here, because at 19 years of age, he decided to take his life by jumping in front of a train. This isn't an indictment on you or on America. This is just a public service announcement that's stating that we're here and we deserve to live and to thrive. Thank you.
That is, did I lose my screen?
No, we still hear you, yeah.
You can see me. Okay, hold on. Let me see if I can get it back up again. That is just one of like the most powerful TED Talks that I've listened to, because what happens is you give an insight into not just hearing a professional speak, but someone who really is in the community who deals with this every day. So I know that's a lot of heaviness on your heart when you think about the things that have happened during COVID and things that even preceded COVID historically, to how we are the people who we have come to be today, to how we raise our children, and now how COVID has impacted. So when you look at people, especially because of COVID and not having those social connections right now, and you say, oh, they're just going through things. So they really may be going through depression, which is that constant feeling of sadness and loss of interest. It stops you literally from getting out the bed. It stops you from enjoying certain things, as in just putting on a new pair of tennis shoes. It stops you from enjoying spending time with your family. It stops you from looking at yourself in the mirror. And so some of those symptoms can range from really minor things to I can still go to work and I can socialize, but I no longer want to do bowling. I no longer want to be a part of my sorority or my fraternity. I no longer want to go swimming. To the event of I really do need to have some mental health assistance and I do need some medication. And depression does not just come from one single thing, one breakup, one divorce, one bank robbery, one car accident. It comes from a mix of events and factors. Anxiety is your body's natural response to stress. It's the feeling of fear. Not just the fear of what am I going to do, but COVID has people in a very secure state of shock. And I say secure because it's clamped down and it's locked into people's lives and in their mind. And so some people say, oh, it's just COVID. You could just move past it. You're not relating to people. You can just move past it. But until you place yourself in their shoes and really understand what it feels like to have that anxiety, which is one of the most common forms of emotional situations that people can go through, not just whether or not it's scariness to get on a roller coaster or scariness to drive or scariness to go across the street, but anxiety can impact every part of your life. The trauma and the stress-related disorders, those are stress things that have a group of emotional and behavioral problems that come from childhood. So those are all of those things that I talked about, whether it is the loss of a family member or a bank robbery or a car accident, even to the impact of watching Hurricane Katrina or the 9/11. All of those things severely impact what happens to people on a day-to-day basis. And although they may not be bringing it up every single day, although they may not be talking about the grief and the loss, they may not be talking about how it feels to get in a car, they may not talk about how it feels when I see you with your father, how I see you with your mother, knowing that they don't have that person in their life, how it feels to be sick and to go through different things. Those are those traumas and stress-related issues that impact our thinking every day. So why don't people get help? People don't get help because of the stigma that's associated with it. People are going to call you names. People are going to say you're crazy. People are going to begin to have certain perceptions of you. They're going to begin to say, we don't want to deal with that person. We're going to shun that person. There are a lot of people, though, who are also just not well informed. There's a lot of people who say, I know something is happening with me. I feel it, I see it. People are mentioning it. It's impacting what I do. I just don't know what to do. Where do I go to get help? Sometimes professional help is not always on hand. If you live in a very remote town or city where resources are very limited,